to order. This is the School District of Waukesha, the Finance and Facilities Committee. It's February 6, 2023. Have we been properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you, Jess. And rolling right into our opportunity for public comment, did anyone sign up to address us? Oh, okay. We're going to roll right into our action items. Our first action item is the approval of the minutes from January 9th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
To that effect. Thank you, Mr. McCaffrey. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Kozlowski. Any questions or changes that need to be made? All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, passes 4-0. Moving on to our vouchers. Sherry, did we have any questions called in?
Yes. We had a couple of questions. I did more research on some of them, but I can give some basic information. There was a $68,000 voucher for, for Avid. And the question was it for travel costs or training costs? And it appears to be both intermingled in there, but I'm working on getting the invoice, didn't have a lot of detail, so I'm working on getting more detail on how much of it was for the actual training costs versus travel costs. So I will circle back with everyone on that. And then the additional question was, how much have we spent on Avid as a project since this past summer of 22? And we have spent a total of $173,498.38 on Avid expenditures. If you want more of a breakdown on exactly what that all is, I'm happy to run some reports and provide that. And then there was a question on an e-achieve expense for Novad Consulting, and it was for coaching and course review. Again, I have an email out to try to get more information on what type of course review and what type of coaching. So I will get that information to you. And then there was a question, and I apologize, there was a mix-up in, I'm thinking that this got communicated back, but questions that were unanswered from last month. So I've got those answers. One of the questions was niche.com. Do we work directly with them, or do we go to a third party and we work directly with niche.com? The other question was propane costs. So I'm just going to put together a breakdown. In September, we paid an average of $1.62 per gallon for propane and $4.78 of diesel. And October, the propane dropped to $1.39 and the diesel stayed at $4.78. And then November, the propane went up to $1.42 and the diesel went up to $5.09. And we average around 13,000 to 14,000 gallons of propane, and I did confirm that it's measured in gallons, how we purchase it. And diesel was anywhere from 165 to 228 gallons. And then the last question from last month that I had to do with National Louis University and what do we use them for, and it's for literacy skills training, and we don't actually send people there. We have a trained coach in-house, but we pay for teachers to participate in a graduate program, graduate level courses to in literacy skills, and so we have someone in-house teaching it, and it fulfills it's for the classroom teachers and special education and intervention teachers. The graduate coursework is a one-time training that occurs over a full academic year. And again, it's led by district coach and teacher, currently Lisa Lorenz. And then after the initial certification, the teachers maintain their certification in the district at no additional cost through continuing professional development. This past year, we had 8 school-wide Title I teachers participating and 1 additional teacher that was paid through ESSER funds at a non-Title I school. The training class is not offered every year. It's dependent on the district needs. So I believe that was the follow-up that was needed for last month. Are there any questions on this month's or additional questions from last month?
Any questions or comments on what Sherry's presented? Okay, and no other ones that we have right now? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Sherry, for bringing us up to speed on those questions. This time I'd be
I
looking...
will document them so that they get in the meeting minutes. I just don't have access to Word at home when I work from home today.
Okay. Do we happen to have a motion for approval of the vouchers?
So moved.
Is there a second? Seconded by Dr. Piasek. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes 5-0, Jess. Moving on to our East Charter School contract. It was 5 years ago, I think, when we had passed this charter school contract, and looks like we're up for renewal. Darren, are you going to take this one?
Actually, Dr. Cook's here to walk us.
Oh, hey, Joe.
Hi there. So
You didn't sneak in. I knew
No,
you were here.
I've been here.
I just
Yeah.
didn't connect the dots there, Joe.
So we have Sue Poppy with us tonight, the principal of East, to answer any questions that you might have. But yes, the contract is up for renewal. We, every 5 years, have to come to the board through F&F to get approval for the contract. We have updated it to meet some of the current educational offerings for students. We've updated the area in the contract that talks about the grade levels, for instance. It's used to be a 9 through 12 program. We've expanded that through offerings down to grade 6 for students at East. So we are seeking your approval of the contract this evening.
Okay, we've all had a chance to review that contract too. Are there questions, comments on the contract? Dr. Piasek?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I continue to be impressed by some of the improvements at East, and it seems like our students are really thriving there.
Thanks.
I think thanks to your leadership, so.
Thank you.
for that. I have like 3 just minor grammatical or technical changes, so I will just pass those along. It's not worth discussing because they don't change context. There's some duplicate words. I did just have a clarifying question. When we talked about admission requirements, there was only one reference to the selection team. It was in the same context as how the student services team initiates kind of that request. I'm assuming the selection team is different than that. So who is that?
You're good.
Is it on? Oh, there it goes, sorry. Basically, the referral process starts at the home high school or their middle school. They're more placed in middle school. So the home high school counselors, social workers will call us, fill out the form to get that. Once it comes to us, I have a team that we come together, my leadership team, and then we'll review those things, and then once we go through what exactly they need. Do they have an IEP? What are they being referred for? Is it mental health? Is it credit deficiency? Look at all that criteria, and then from there, we sit down and we're like, okay, let's schedule the intake. So then the students come in with the families and we do the intake at that point.
Thank you. That was my only question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions or other questions or comments? I had a couple. The policy waivers, do they differ at all in this contract from the contract 5 years ago?
No,
Okay, so they're just basically...
they're pretty much what was approved before.
Okay. And with any charter school, there typically are some policy waivers, and I think it's worked well the last 5 years, so I just was curious if we modified any of those. And also, could you speak to the governance board and who's on that? How well is that working? I know sometimes it's tough to get the mix of people we want and/or meet on a regular basis, but if you could maybe give a little bit of history over this, the past year or so.
This year, we have a parent, we have some student representatives, and we have a small team for our CSI team that we do meet. Going forward, though, I really do want to have a true governance board. It doesn't seem like there was a historically one that met regularly, say monthly, once a quarter, whatever we want that to look like. So for me, that's one of my to-dos big time for next year. We kind of melded it all together with our CSI team, or the parent representative, student representative. We have outside agencies involved and myself.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great goal to have, and hopefully you can achieve it. It has been tough over the years, particularly for these programs, and for a variety of reasons. We don't need to go into that, but my hat's off to you. I hope you can pull those different stakeholders together to improve that.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or motions? Mr. McCaffrey.
Thank you. I move approval of the East Charter School contract as presented.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Robertson. Further discussion? I think it's fantastic. School's been doing great things.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. I hope it passes right now. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
No, thank you. Hope I did that right.
Moving on to our discussion and information items, our monthly budget report. You sure you're going to give that?
I hope so.
I don't see her now.
I'm here, I just took my camera off.
Oh, okay. Are you feeling okay? You all right? You're good?
I'm fine. I just have a back cold, that's all. Didn't want to come share again. So let me, I'm going to pull up my.
Yeah, I had this voice thing where it was difficult for me to carry on any discussion without sucking on cough drops 24/7 during whatever the conversation was. I don't know if you have a voice issue or not, Sherry, with what you have?
It may disappear. It comes and goes, so we'll see. There's not much to report this month, so to last. Going into the budget for this year, for this last month, our interest rates continue to be favorable. The LGIP interest was not available at the time this report was created, so we still have a large amount to report for January. Last month's LGIP was over 166,000, and we should have a similar amount this month, so that will increase. As I discussed last month, the student fees and textbooks are starting to catch up, which we had anticipated. So that's good news. We received our first tax payments in January, totaling $42,759,766. Fund 41 is settled first. That is not an accurate number. I'm sorry, what went into Fund 10, that I must have subtracted out Fund 39 instead of Fund 41 to get that total. So I apologize. It's more like 39,000 now with Fund 10. Unfortunately, the cash receipts were not completely updated yet when we had such a short turnaround time on this report, and so the cash receipts weren't quite ready. So the Fund 10 taxes are not being reflected in revenue. Next month's report, you'll see that we did indeed receive them. Overall, in revenue, local sources were doing really well. We expect to be Inter-district, we just continue to receive the achieved tuition, which until the end of the year, when we get our open enrollment transfer, that's just about the only thing we'll see in this category is the achieved tuition for Fund 10. Intermediate source, we received our payment from CISA for Carl Perkins grant. State sources, we got our transportation aid, was $109,000, and a reimbursement from the county for Peers for Peers expenses. Federal sources, we just had a small Title I payment that we received of $24,056. Other revenue, we had a return of premium on our insurance totaling $18,336. Every year they do an insurance audit, and then they come back and adjust our premium. We had a favorable year, we get some money back usually, and we had a favorable year. And also in addition to the $18,000, we also received a workers' comp dividend of $116,278. We also received an E-rate reimbursement of $70,605. If you're not familiar with E-rate, it's a government program that we can get reimbursement on some technology costs, and Steve Schulman handles all of that. We never quite know when the reimbursements will be coming, but we usually get a nice reimbursement every year. The percentages received are skewed because the taxes aren't shown in there, so it wasn't worth comparing from this year to last year, but we're in really good shape with our revenue. Expenditures, with the January payroll runs, our Fund 10 payroll expenses, we're starting to trend to being under budget, which is good because Fund 27 is trending over budget, but in looking at the two of them, they should wash each other out. So overall, I think we'll be on track with payroll. It's just that the Fund 10 and Fund 27 are off each a different way though. Purchase services. Our top areas, as always, are personal services, utilities, and tuition. That's where I have in there this month, and people travel. The majority of the personal services, there wasn't any really big spend in there this month. It was mostly smaller type items. Probably that added expense was the largest one at $68,000. Non-capital. Again, there was no, in non-capital objects, non-capital equipment is our largest spend, but again, just a lot of smaller purchases, nothing that jumps out as being a large expenditure. Minimal spending in capital objects, insurance, we just had a small payment for unemployment claim in January. No transfers, which is normal until we get to the end of the year and do our Fund 27 transfer. Other objects in minimal activity, right now we spent 37.98% of our approved budget, and last year at this time we were at 38.51, so we're right in there where we expect to be. Fund 27, we had another of our categorical aid payments, special education for $1.1 million. We also received a Medicaid payment of $56,000. Expenses for Fund 27, we just talked about it. Payroll was high, but will be offset by we're saving in Fund 10. People travel and tuition, as always, are the main purchase services. Non-capital objects, supplies, no capital objects, no transfers, and nothing in other. We spent 46.79% of our special education budget. Last year we were at 44.32. Our health insurance continues to be favorable. We're still sitting in a really good position. And same thing with dental. Dental, we're chipping away a little bit each month at our surplus, but a very small amount. We should continue for a long time to have a good fund balance. The one thing I have to revise the health spreadsheet that went out because I realized on the very bottom I didn't update the surplus amount. So I will revise that and get that to Gus, but we're still sitting at about the same amount that we had last month. So we're still in good position.
Okay, thank you for that, Sherry.
Question?
Questions or comments? Mrs. Kozlowski?
Yeah, I just have one question, Darren, probably more for you. When are we taking a look at that reserve that we have for the premiums and how long we expect to hold it?
We're going to be getting our first estimate for renewals in the end of this month, so I was thinking in March we would bring that back and just kind of give you a snapshot of where we are. One of the assumptions that we're making to balance next year's budget is no increase in healthcare costs. For this year, the board authorized, just so we all remember, since the conversation will be coming back next month, authorized the use of $750,000 of reserves, which we may or may not need. So that could be something similar, could be a tool to get to that 0% increase too.
Perfect, thank you.
Other questions or comments on our budget for this last month? Yes.
Just
Dr.
one,
Cassidy.
specific to the dental claims, if I look month over month, there seems to be an ongoing difference between the expenditures and revenues. Is that a seasonal thing? Is that something we typically see December, January, or is that something that we need to be watching?
We tend to see, actually, most of the dental activity comes in the summertime. We had built up a very large surplus in the dental. And right now, I think we're using about $40,000 a month of that, if I recall. Off the top of my head, I can.
It's about 80 in December, so I'm just a little bit,
But the balance is
Sure,
extremely large compared to where it was prior to the pandemic. And so we've been expecting there to be catch up in the dental claims. And it's just starting to catch up now, but really the surplus is large enough that right now I don't see a trend that's a problem.
Okay. Mr. McCaffrey?
Isn't that insurance on a calendar year? I know mine is.
No, our dental is on the school year.
It's on the school year, and that's why it's so high in the summer, though. Everybody's getting all their stuff done in June. Yeah, you think you'd have, you think it would be that high in December if we have it structured like that.
And I appreciate that there's a residual balance maybe from underutilization previously. It just, if we continue to chip away at it at this pace, I don't know when that becomes
Right, well, it's a
problem.
defined benefit, though, so we,
Yeah,
Right, there's a cap.
It's something we'll have to look at when the dental, renewal costs, when determining next year's costs, because we were able to hold it constant. And so we'll have to look at how much of the reserve we've used and estimate out what the impact is in future years to know if there needs to be an increase to the dental premium that's booked or not. We're self-funded with dental plans.
thank you.
I just had one quick question, Sherry, in your health claims payable. You have a couple things highlighted in green, long-term disability premiums and early retiree premium. Is there any reason for that? They're not out of order or anything, right?
I normally try to grade that out for the report. No, that's just kind of our personal, this document is shared between other people and it's kind of a personal reminder of who does what.
Okay.
There's nothing special about it.
Okay, I gotcha.
Other than it's coming from someone else.
It didn't look like it was special, but then it looked special. Thank you, I appreciate that. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Sherry, for that. And moving on to our monthly update on our ESSER funds. Who's going to take that?
Just a quick update. Teaching and Learning is going to be bringing back those items, or did you guys meet already? I lose track.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Those items you looked at last year, you wanted to put on hold, so that approval will be coming, or your consideration on that will be forthcoming, and once we have that in place, we'll update the cash flow and the graphs and all of that.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Piasek?
I'm going to share a comment because I think I did get some questions from some community members about this. There was a report that was recently conducted and released that I think for the appropriate reasons was intended to give some transparency to how the ESSER funding was spent across the state. Unfortunately, I think the way that those claims were processed at the state level and the timeline that was given to districts to actually make those requests gives the wrong impression that either the money hasn't been spent appropriately or that it hasn't been spent or allocated at all. So I just thought it would be worth, in the context of this conversation, to talk about maybe what that timeline is, because I know Darren is watching that carefully with his team, and that we have, for all practical purposes, allocated as a board all of that money, with the exception of what we will meet to discuss tomorrow night, which has been provisionally allocated. We just wanted to bring it back and see if there were any changes. But Darren, could you just maybe clarify, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, I apologize, but
Sorry.
the timeline of when those requests, and especially with ESSER 3, was intended to be submitted?
Yeah, the amount that's on that website, it's, I forget it off the top of my head, but it's a very, very low
Very
number.
small.
And I think we maybe talked about this just kind of in passing at last month, or maybe at cabinet level. The balance of unused ESSER, I think, is going to be a topic at the state budget process. And I think it's important for us, as we talk to legislators, et cetera, to say, we haven't spent it yet, but everything's been assigned or will be shortly. So when you look at that, the timing of those claims, we can't claim until we've incurred the cost. So if you look at the HVAC work, for example, that might spread over 2 summers. So those claims, some of them will come 2 years after the board had acted. So it's hard for us to report, and I think it's very hard for a third party to jump into the seat and try to give the best information. Not that they're not doing their best they can to make that happen. That's not the point of my comment. But if people do want to know where we are with ESSER, I think that spreadsheet we have on our website gives you specifics, but it also kind of breaks it down into large categories like facilities and teaching and learning, or learning recovery, and those types of things. So I would ask people to go out to our website, and they can reach out to me with any questions they might have related to that information. And again, we'll be updating that Thursday, after the board's acted, so we're here to help if there's questions.
And it was school year 2024 was the expectation for ESSER 3.
Right. September of '24.
And 1 year before for September, or for ESSER 2 funds?
Yep. And we have met the reading recovery 20% threshold that ESSER 3 had with that adoption that may or may not happen this week. So we've hit all the criteria and exceeded what the minimum criteria, not that we shoot for the minimum, but there was a threshold for that for teaching and learning, and we have far exceeded that number.
Do you know the percentage?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay.
Closer to 30.
Between ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, I want to say it was about 25% were spending on learning recovery.
Yeah, but let us get those final graphs out, because I think the numbers coming back to committee tomorrow are a little higher than what you saw last year. It's been a year of inflation and counts of materials. So we'll roll out those percentages on the website, and maybe I'll include them in the Friday update, so the board has them.
Thank you.
I've had similar comments from some of our constituents, and one of the things that I had to share with them is, first of all, this is new to us. Second of all, it takes us some time to figure out what we want to do for learning recovery. Third, you don't just say, okay, we're going to do this for learning recovery and roll it out the next day. We buy materials, we train people, and it might not start till the next school year. And so once you share with them that, it's not a on-the-spot decision, and you turn it around the next day, kind of give them a little bit of logistics there, then people start to understand. But there is a concern out there that, our district's really, how are they handling this money? And I think we're handling it appropriately and within the timeline. And how we're handling it, I think, obviously I voted for those things, so I must like those things, how we're handling it. So I appreciate the question, and it's good that our constituents are asking those questions.
No, I would agree.
Anything else on the ESSER update? Okay. Are there any recommendations for topics to be added to the committee's agenda? All right, seeing none, we do have a need to move into closed session. And once we go into closed session, will we have a need to come back into open session at all, Mr. Clark? Okay. So right now, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn to executive session. Dr. Piasek?
I'll be happy to, thank you. I move to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses E, for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, safety and security, and transportation contract.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Kozlowski. Jess, will you take the roll call vote?
Mr. McCaffrey?
Aye.
Dr. Piasek?
Aye.
Ms. Robertson?
Aye.
Mr. Como?
Aye.
And Ms. Kozlowski?
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0. We'll move right into closed session. And those of you watching on TV, I hope you all have a good evening.